Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Suravangsha Jayate. Om Hari Om. Namaste, everyone. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you this evening. And if you are here for the very first time, what you are experiencing is something that is extremely unique, to say the very least. What we do here every Monday on the Dharma Nation channel is indeed this live stream, which is in actuality what we call a satsanga. This is an age-old procedure that happens, an age-old thing that occurs within the totality of Sanatana Dharma, in which we discuss the Vedic scriptures. And we discuss this tradition, the most ancient, continuously practiced spiritual tradition on the face of the earth, period. We discuss this in every important and relevant manner imaginable, and we do so in an authoritative and a very authentic sort of way. Other names for this tradition include, Hinduism. Sometimes people will call it the Vedic tradition. Sometimes people will call it yoga, etc. And the truth of the matter is, the most ancient term for this tradition, which goes back indeed to Rig Veda itself, is Sanatana Dharma. Dharma Sanatanaha is what it says in the Rig Veda. So this term, Sanatana Dharma, is the name of this tradition. And indeed, again, we explore this tradition in as traditional, as radically orthodox, and as authentic a way as is possible. And to do that, as far as the procedure for how that's done, that's actually pretty simple. We explore this tradition 100%, not 99%, 100% in accordance with the actual scriptures of this tradition. Indeed, other religions do this. They understand that if you're a Muslim, well, you look at what the Quran says. You don't mix and match, you don't make things up. If you're a serious Christian, same thing, the Bible. You look at the Bible, you don't just make things up. This is the basis of authority for anything that is spoken of theologically or philosophically. Well, this is the case also for Sanatana Dharma. Today, sadly, in modern day, what is sometimes called Hinduism, people have lost sight of that fact. And people sometimes will think that, oh, you literally can just have any opinion that you want and claim that it is quote unquote Hinduism and that's good enough. That's not good enough. It's never been good enough. Rather, again, the way that we understand this tradition is in accordance with the scriptures of the tradition. The honored teachings of this tradition that have been handed down from guru to disciple, etc. So this is what we do here every single week. So indeed, it's unique what we do. What we're going to be doing today is indeed something else that's unique. And that is that we're going to be looking at the culture of yoga. Now, people know that I've spoken about many different aspects of yoga, both on live streams, but also videos, just standalone videos. Also in my books, I speak very extensively about yoga. And yoga from every perspective. That is, philosophically, first and foremost. Yoga is a philosophy. It's one of the Shad Darshanas, one of the 6 philosophical systems of, again, what is called Astika, what is called the orthodox understanding of Sanatana Dharma. But I've also spoken about yoga as far as, the asanas, all the 8 limbs, etc., etc., history of yoga. Well, one thing that we're going to be doing today that makes today's live stream rather unique is that we're going to be talking about the culture of yoga. And this is something I haven't really given a full talk on. Oh, I've spoken about it endlessly, but bits and pieces here and there. But as far as a full systematic talk, this will be the first time that I'm doing this. And before we jump into that, in fact, let me speak a little bit about why this is of importance. Why it's of importance to understand what is the actual culture, the civilizational cultural elements, let's say, of yoga itself. Well, the reason why this is important is for the same reason why it is of importance for Sanatana Dharma in general. I've said this many times, and again, it's very sad that other gurus don't really go to this extent and speak about this with such breadth and depth. Sanatana Dharma and yoga, actually, but let's focus on Sanatana Dharma itself for a moment. It is a philosophical system. It is a spiritual worldview. It is a religious tradition. It is all of these things. But what makes Sanatana Dharma different from every other, again, philosophy, worldview, etc., religion upon the face of the earth, is that it is infinitely more than just this. It is a civilization. And for those of you out there who have studied that word and what the word civilization actually means, it's not that you can claim anything as a civilization. Some things are, some things aren't. Sanatana Dharma is indeed a civilization, meaning that it incorporates within it every single aspect of the human experience and every single field of human concern. That's a civilization, and more harmonized in such a way that that civilization practically functions and functions well for the citizens of that civilization. So there's the definition of a civilization. Sanatana Dharma is a civilization, the Vedic civilization. This being the case, it is important for us to also understand Sanatana Dharma and by extension yoga, not just in its philosophical / religious elements, but also in what it means to follow Sanatana Dharma and yoga as a culture, as an actual culture. Now, all this being said, now let's focus on yoga specifically. Yoga is very simply Sanatana Dharma in practical application. That's what yoga is. For those individuals who are not aware of this, for those individuals who think that somehow yoga can be divorced, can be separated from the tradition of Sanatana Dharma, it can't. It's not a possibility. There's no such thing as Christian yoga. There's no such thing as Muslim yoga, as any other form of yoga. Yoga is the religion of Sanatana Dharma in practical application and practice. That is what yoga is. Now, all this being understood, of course, we are to conclude that yoga itself also has a culture, that is, civilizational elements that are exterior to the actual practice and that help to foster the practice of yoga itself. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. This is what we're going to be talking about. So again, this is going to be a rather unique talk. And very specifically, we're going to be looking at the Yoga Yajnavalkya. Try to say that 3 times very fast. It's difficult. But this is a very important text, Yoga Yajnavalkya, that has been recognized for thousands of years. We consider it to be a Vedic text because it is revealed by a Vedic Rishi, Yajnavalkya, who is very, very famous. Indeed, not long ago, we actually looked at some of his teachings in a previous live stream. I forget how long, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, something like that. But just a little something about Yajnavalkya. Again, he is famous for many things. First and foremost, he is known to be a Vedantist. He is one of the great sages of the Upanishads, and specifically Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is, I believe, the largest as far as actual volume, the largest of the Upanishads. This is his Upanishad. And in that Upanishad, he stresses Vedanta, Vedanta, Vedanta. But he is also known to have written several other works as well, in addition to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. One of these works is the work that we're examining today, Yoga Yajnavalkya, which is named, of course, after him. Yajnavalkya was certainly a philosopher. He was an individual who was truly an enlightened being. In fact, all that I'm saying is putting it very lightly. He was a rishi, a true rishi. And this is how we can say very easily that Yoga Yajnavalkya is not just a book about yoga written by some guy in the past. It is a scripture. Because by definition, scripture is revealed by the rishis, by these individuals who are seers, who have the ability to reveal scriptures. And Yajnavalkya is one of these recognized rishis. So thus, when we're looking at this work, indeed, this is a yoga scripture. For people who don't know, there's much more than just the Yoga Sutras. Yoga Sutras are wonderful, but there are quite a few people in the ancient world, and I should say within Sanatana Dharma, who also wrote about yoga, or who spoke about yoga, including Bhagavad Gita, which is a yoga text. Now, with that, this is a very long passage. It represents several verses in sequence. I'm going to first read this to everyone. If you want to follow along, please go to the description of this video, and you'll see the full verse. You can feel free to follow along. This is not my translation. Again, when something is my translation, I let you know, but this is not my translation. This translation was good. I didn't feel a need to revise it or retranslate or anything. It's straight to the point. So with that, let me read this long passage to you, and then we will go through it. Yajnavalkya uvacha. Yajnavalkya said, one who performs all the actions advocated by the Vedas and is devoid of desire, who is endowed with all the yamas and niyamas, who is uninvolved in worldly affairs, who has completed his studies of the Shastras, who has overcome anger, who is devoted to the performance of his duty and to truth, who dutifully serves his guru, who is devoted to his parents, who adheres to the duties of his stage in life, that is ashrama, according to varna-ashrama-dharma, who is of good conduct and character, and who has been well educated by great scholars. Now that individual, after going to a grove suitable for spiritual pursuits, which has plenty of fruits, roots, and good water, in that pleasing, pure place which resounds with the chanting of the Vedas, surrounded by tranquil Vedic scholars, who are devoted to their duty, who have realized Brahman, having built a beautiful, well-protected Matha near a temple or a flowing river, in a village or a city, abounding in water, filled with fruit and roots, and with flowers of different varieties, the entire surroundings being capable of bestowing all desired results. In that Matha, the aspirant should bathe thrice a day, always be devoted to his duties according to varna-ashrama-dharma, listen to Vedanta, and practice the path of yoga. Very good. So this is all from the 5th chapter of Yoga Yajnavalkya, and it is verses 3 to 9. So again, several verses here. And it's a long passage. We're going to go through this as quickly as we can. I do want to leave time for questions and answers, as we always try to do. But let's go through this a little bit. First of all, before we even begin, actually, let me just say, with what we have just read of this, isn't this beautiful? Isn't this the way that any spiritual person, any person who is steeped in goodness, isn't this how such a person would want to live? And that's the point. That is the point, that we're speaking now of the culture of yoga. We're talking about how a yogi should actually live within the world. But with that, now let's go on and let's look at this. So first of all, Yajnavalkya said, so this is all Yajnavalkya speaking. First, one who performs all the actions advocated by the Vedas. We're going to stop there. So this confirms what I was just saying at the very beginning of our meeting today. And that is that how do we know? How do we know? How do we know anything of importance? How do we know anything that is of philosophical importance, theological importance as far as practice, etc., etc.? So anything of spiritual importance, how do we know that X thing is true versus untrue? We follow the Veda. So again, as I was saying, this is what myself, my students, and everyone involved with the International Sanatana Dharma Society, this very channel itself, this very live stream, this is what we are dedicated to, is to understanding truth and Sanatana Dharma, not in accordance with speculation or the most recent scholarship, quote unquote, no, in accordance with the Vedas. So here, Yoga Yajnavalkya begins this very passage with this. First, the epistemological foundation of how do you know what is truth. So, one who performs all actions advocated by the Vedas. All right, now let's go on. And who is devoid of desire. Now, we've spoken about this. Indeed, some of this is why I'm saying, even though it's a long passage, we're going to go through this somewhat quickly, because much of this, if you've been my student for some time, we've talked about these various things very in depth. Who is devoid of desire? What does this mean? Material desire. Material desire. See, if you have zero desires, you do not have a basis then for the proper operation of free will, because free will comes about due to desire. So the idea that we are to rid ourselves of all desire, no, that's not logical. That simply does not follow. The reason why this is the case is because, again, if we don't have desire, we don't have free will. What do we do with free will? We determine, oh, I desire such and such, thus I will take proper action to achieve such and such. If we don't have desire, thus free will, we are no longer sentient beings. We are insentient. At that point, we're robots. And indeed, we're not robots. We're not meant to be robots. We're not meant to be stones. So it is material desire that is being spoken of here. Desire that occurs within the realm of illusion, that occurs as a result of illusion on the part of the individual Atman. So now let's go on. Who is endowed with all the yamas and niyamas. Indeed, it's very nice. Not long ago, again, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did a live stream in which we went very in depth into the yamas and niyamas. These are the 10 principles, the 10 virtue principles of yoga and really Sanatana Dharma itself, actually. This extends not just to yoga, but to Sanatana Dharma itself. Indeed, if you're a follower of Sanatana Dharma, you are meant to follow these 5 proscriptions and prescriptions, these 10 altogether. 5 proscriptions, 5 prescriptions, a total of 10 yamas and niyamas. And these are not commandments. It's not like the 10 Commandments in any way whatsoever. Rather, these are ethical and virtue principles. And again, I'm not going to go in depth. We put out a video, a live stream, very recently. Just feel free to look that up, and it will give you further explanation. Let's go on. Who is uninvolved in worldly affairs. Now, very interesting. What is meant by this? 2 things, actually. Let me go slightly in depth into this, even though I have spoken about this in the past. What is meant by worldly affairs? Well, first of all, what is meant is this. Everyone to some extent has to engage in some worldly affairs. Even a yogi living the life of a fully celibate monk, etc., full-time yogi has to eat. That's a worldly affair. Everyone has to engage in some worldly affairs to some degree. The difference between doing things within the material world spiritually versus in illusion is that when you do things spiritually within the material world, you are doing them not merely for their own sake, not merely for material pleasure, but you're doing them in order to help yourself to achieve a higher goal, a spiritual goal, to do your seva, to do service, etc. Versus the materialist for whom, and this is the example I've given many times. When a spiritual person eats an apple, they eat it spiritually. They are aware that that apple is a manifestation of the energy of God and thus a gift. The materialistic person, they just eat it because they like the taste of apples. And that's about as deep as a materialistic person will go. So indeed, when we talk about someone who is uninvolved in worldly affairs, it is not that the yogi or the spiritual person does not accomplish things in this world. On the contrary, what it means is that their primary concern in life is spiritual. And indeed, everything else that they do in order to help the spiritual. That means the home that they own. That means to state it in modern terms, the car that they own, etc., etc., etc. So that's what's meant by that. Now let's go on. Who has completed his studies of the Shastras. So now Shastras and Vedas are synonymous. They're two different words for really the same thing. There's some slight technical difference, but it's not even worth going into right now. To look at the technical difference, please read my book, The Vedic Way of Knowing God, and I go very in depth into the difference between these two words technically. But really they're referring to the same thing, the scriptures. So now, not just one who performs actions that are advocated by the scriptures, but a little deeper. Someone who has now studied the Shastras very in depth. Someone who, it's not just that, oh, to the best of their knowledge, they're doing their best to follow the Vedic scriptures. But no, they have now engaged in a systematic process of study of the Vedic scriptures. And of course, what does that mean? That means under the tutelage of a guru. Not just that they go to a bookstore or they go to Amazon or someplace and they buy a slew of Vedic scriptures and they sit at home sipping tea and reading the scriptures. No, that's certainly something good that a person should do. But more, to truly study means to study. And study means very specifically that you study under the tutelage of a guru, someone who can reveal the innermost depths of the Vedic scriptures, the purports. Now let's go on. Who has overcome anger? Oh, so important. So important. You know, this has always been a problem with human beings, and especially throughout certainly the totality of our current age, the Kali Yuga, but then stretching back even into the Dvapara Yuga, and then depending on the species, the race of individuals you're talking about, even stretching back to the Treta Yuga, is that there have always been individuals who struggle with anger. You know, so again, even in the Treta Yuga, you had massive demonic beings like Ravana and other beings who, oh, they couldn't control their anger, they couldn't control their emotions. But now we're talking about today. Today, what we've seen is that this is a truly prevalent problem, that people cannot control any of their emotions, really, but especially when it comes to anger. This is why we see so much conflict that takes place between religions, between people with different ideologies, politically, etc., etc., etc. Even over the most petty things. Forget about ideas. People just get angry if you look at them the wrong way or something like that today. And indeed, this is why Yajnavalkya is making it very clear that the person he's speaking of here, that is the yogi, is someone who has overcome anger. You cannot be a spiritual person if you don't have control over your anger. And again, to repeat this, it's not that you become a robot and you are emotionless. No, even the great rishis displayed emotions when they needed to. But the point is you have control over your emotions. And specifically, anger is one of the worst. It is an emotion that brings about vast destruction very often to the person involved and to the people around him. So this is why a yogi must overcome anger. Let's go on. Who is devoted to the performance of his duty. Let me read this again, and please hear the voices of your ancestors. Please hear the voices of the great people of the past as you are hearing this. Who is devoted to the performance of his duty. This is something that in our dark age no one thinks about anymore. No one speaks about, and very few people actually perform. And that is whatever our station is in life, whoever we are, in accordance with our psychophysical nature, in accordance with our svadharma, in accordance with our own nature. We have duties in this world. And the idea is knowing what your duty is. You're a husband, you have duties to your family. You are a wife, a mother, you have duties to your children. You are in the military, you have duties to your nation and to your higher officers, etc., the command structure, the chain of command, and on, an infinite number of duties in accordance with who you are. Well, the idea is that you must take those duties seriously, and you must perform those duties seriously and without excuse. Today, of course, very few people do this. A few people in the military, they're trained very nicely. They have an understanding, an inkling of this ancient and eternal understanding of duty. But today, many people have lost this understanding, and this is why people have become lazy. This is why so many people take government handouts in one form or another. People want things for free. People want things without working for them. People want things instantly, to the point where even in spirituality, people have the idea you can buy some secret mantra and you'll have enlightenment in 30 days or less, etc., etc. The idea of duty, the idea of no, you don't have excuses, you just do what is your job and you do it with excellence, is something that we've been deprived of in recent days. Well, if you're going to be a yogi, if you're going to be a spiritual person, you have to perform your duty, and you have to be devoted to performing your duty. Now let's go on. And to truth. Well, that's a given. An individual who is spiritual is an individual who both does not lie, but also is devoted to truth. This is the wording that's used here, is devoted to truth. What does that mean? It means that you understand truth as a manifestation of God. You understand that truth in itself is something that is a living factor. That truth in itself is something that you are devoted to. Truth does not exist to serve you. Let me repeat this. Let me drive this home for individuals who are somewhat new to the channel, and let's say maybe you have more of a maybe somewhat new age sort of understanding of everything, but we're talking about truth specifically right now. Truth does not exist to serve you. Truth is not your plaything. It is not your object. It is not your tool. On the contrary, the Vedic understanding is that indeed actual truth, capital T, is a manifestation of God. It's not that truth is God, but that God is truth. God is the source of truth. This being the case, we see ourselves as very humble, very dutiful servants of truth. Now let's go on. Speaking of dutiful, who dutifully serves his guru. So this goes back to what I was saying before. How do we know truth? How do we study the Vedic scriptures, etc.? How do we have guidance? We have to have a guru. And again, I'm not going to go deeply into this because we have many videos on our channel where we talk about the importance of guru, the guru-disciple relationship, etc., etc., etc. But indeed, someone asked this, I believe in the last live stream, is it absolutely necessary to have a guru in order to have enlightenment? I believe that was the question, or something to that effect. And I didn't bat an eye, I didn't pause for a moment. I said, yes, it is absolutely necessary. You cannot have enlightenment without a guru, period. Period. Anyone who claims that they have is a liar. Let me state that again. Anyone who claims that they have achieved enlightenment without the benefit of a guru, a mentor, a guide, is a liar. We must have a guru. The reason why is because what is this enterprise in which we are engaged? We are trying to be spiritual. What does spiritual mean? Spiritual means that which is living in the truest sense of that term. We're talking about consciousness itself. Truth is conveyed from consciousness to consciousness. This is why there must be a living presence in our life. That's why there must be a person, a personality who is there, embodied in material form so that we can hear the words, so that we can see the example, etc. But indeed, the way that truth is conveyed to us is by a living being who has achieved truth, who has realized the truth. So this is why guru is essential if we're going to make any serious spiritual progress. Not illusory spiritual progress, not lying to ourselves, telling us that I'm enlightened now, and we're not. We're vast miles away from enlightenment. This is why we need someone outside of ourselves to monitor us and to tell us, oh, I know you had a really good spiritual experience with that last meditation. You're not enlightened yet. Don't make that mistake. You'll end up slipping back instead of continuing forward. We need a person to tell us that when our ego wants to tell us that, oh, I'm enlightened now. This is why we must have a guru. But again, for more information, look at our previous videos on guru. Now, this is an interesting and indeed important one. Who is devoted to his parents? Now, again, we are talking about everything that we've looked at so far, but it increases more and more. We're talking about the culture of yoga. This is part of the culture of yoga and sanatana dharma itself. And that is that indeed we respect our parents. So how is this stated again? Give me one moment. Who is devoted to his parents. So this is something that is one of the, let's say, ethical foundational bedrocks of Sanatana Dharma. And that is living in a truly functioning society, a truly spiritual society in which everyone is performing their duty, in which everyone is doing their very best to incorporate spirituality into their lives, and thus being ethical, being virtuous, etc., etc. The idea, of course, is that in such a society, our parents would be virtuous. That being the case, oh, we must respect them. We must have devotion to them. We have to listen to their counsel. We have to listen to their sage advice, etc., etc. We don't disrespect our parents in any way. We don't yell at our parents, etc. So again, we're talking about under perfect conditions. I know things are a little bit different now. Well, everything's different now. We're in the very darkest era thus far of the Kali Yuga, where all families have problems, and I know that intimately. I know. I have disciples who they've had bad parents, bad mother, bad father, etc., etc. But again, we are talking about ideally in a Vedic culture and civilization. We are to respect our parents, have devotion toward them. Let's go on. Who adheres to the duties of his stage in life, ashrama. And again, I'm not going to go deeply because this is something easily I can spend several hours speaking about. But very simply, in Sanatana Dharma, the idea is that you go through 4 stages of life. These are known as the ashramas. And you must do your duties in accordance with that stage. So if you're a young person, you would be in the brahmachari stage. This means that if you're a young person previous to being married, you are celibate. And on top of being celibate, you are studying, studying, studying. It means that you are living a healthy lifestyle. This is the idea. If you're a young person, basically from the time you're born up until, right before you get married, so, let's say maybe around 20, early 20s, the idea is that this is the time to do everything in your power to bring out every single strength that you have within you. This means physical. This means be physically fit. This means work out, do yoga, etc. Take wonderful, beautiful hikes in nature. This means with everything that you eat, your lifestyle, be as healthy as possible. It means you grow intellectually. You study, study, study every important topic that you need to study. It means spiritually, that you spend this time of your life being as spiritual as possible, learning under the tutelage of a guru. It means doing meditation, doing puja. It means expressing devotion toward the Lord, etc., etc. And I'm not going to go through all 4 stages. I'm just giving brahmachari, the first stage, as an example. So this is the idea. Whatever stage you find yourself in, perform those duties of that stage and do them well. This is what Yoga Yajnavalkya is telling us. And indeed, now we go on, according to varna-ashrama-dharma. So basically what I just said, that you do your duties in accordance with your stage and in accordance with the totality of the system. So the varnas, that is the 4 varnas of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, but also the 4 stages of life. Now let's go on. Who is of good conduct and character. So indeed, an individual who is a yogi must have proper conduct and character. What is meant by conduct? That which you do. So in other words, you must do the right thing at all times. You must be an ethical person, but in what you are doing. This is what is meant by conduct. Now, what is meant by character? By character, that is that which is intrinsic to who you are, your own inner nature. That is, you must be good also in your character, inwardly as well. So you must be a good person, a good-hearted person inwardly, and that must become manifest in your conduct in every way. Let's go on. And who has been well educated by great scholars. Oh, this is an important one, actually. This is a very nice one. This includes the totality of one's education and learning and acquisition of knowledge. This means certainly under the tutelage of the guru, but really everything. That is, if you're going to learn, if you're going to have a proper education, and this means both spiritually and materially, if you're going to study biology, if you're going to study, again, any specific topic that you are studying early on in your life, you must make sure that you do your best to find the very best scholars, the very best educators who are out there. And how would it be logical to do the opposite? No, you want to find the best. You want to find those individuals who are experts in their field, world class as much as is possible within your vicinity. You want to find those individuals who teach well, who actually know how to teach. And you want to find those individuals who also are living what they are teaching. And again, this includes not just the spiritual, but it can include anything. Let's say that as a young person, the thing that you've wanted to study is martial arts. Well, you can't study martial arts from a so-called martial arts guru who just sits in a chair the whole time he's teaching his class. No, the person has to actually also display that he is a master at martial arts, etc. So you're to find the best individuals if you're to have a proper and good education. Very good. Now, here it shifts a little bit, just a little bit, and you'll see how. So now it talks about more specifically culture, very specifically, even though really this was all culture. After going to a grove suitable for spiritual pursuits, we will pause there for a moment. Grove. Grove is a very nice word, actually. What it means is basically a place in nature, but that is a place that is properly habitable by human beings. So we're not talking about living in a jungle, literally. We're not talking about living in the deepest, remotest jungle. We're talking about living certainly in nature. But within nature, you'll see that there are groves. That is, there are spaces where, oh yes, you can see the sky, and you can actually build a nice little dwelling there, etc. So this is what is meant by a grove, is that it's a little patch of land in nature, and this is where indeed yogis, individuals who are spiritual, ideally are meant to live. So after going to a grove suitable for spiritual pursuits, why is such a place suitable for spiritual pursuits? It's because it's a grove. It's because it's in nature. Again, I need to stress this. Sadly, other so-called gurus, let's say gurus in name, other individuals who will drone on about spiritual topics that they really know nothing about on YouTube videos or in their books, etc. Very often they'll talk about, the urban mystic, the urban monk, etc., etc., etc. And they'll give you this idea that, they're trying to be very democratic and equitable, and really they're just trying to build an audience. And knowing that many people live in cities, they'll say, oh, you can live in the middle of downtown Manhattan. You can live in the middle of Times Square, and you can sit there in Times Square and be a yogi and just meditate, etc., blah, blah, blah. And of course, they're lying. They're lying. I actually tell people the truth about this. You will have the ability to make spiritual progress in accordance with how close to nature you are living, actually. And if you're living in an intense urban environment, oh, please don't get me wrong. You can read the scriptures. If you lock yourself in your apartment and somehow soundproof it, you can do some meditation. But this is not what we're talking about with all these verses. We're talking about being truly a successful yogi, a successful sadhaka, someone who is practicing seriously. This being the case, the closer the further away you get from intense urban environments, the easier it's going to be for you to practice spirituality. So this taken to the ultimate extent, if you have the ability, and again, I know many people don't, but if you have the ability, you want to practice spirituality truly in a rural and very natural setting as much as is possible. This is why real ashrams are established further away from the city, as far away from downtown as possible. So indeed, this is why such an area is suitable for spiritual pursuits. And now it goes a little bit more in depth. It gives a nice explanation of what such a place should look like, which has plenty of fruits, roots, and good water. So very nice. So indeed, again, in perfect times, that is during the Vedic era, let's say previous to approximately 4,000 years ago or so, this was quite a possibility that you could live in a place in nature, but again, not deep, not the wild, not deep jungle. No, you would live in a place deep in nature, but at the same time, there would be a nice open space. You would build your dwelling, you would have cows, etc., and you would be living in a place where food would be all around you. You would have fruits growing on the trees. You'd have coconuts. You would have all sorts of mangoes, everything growing everywhere. All sorts of very good roots, potatoes and all sorts of things just growing all around you. In other words, food was not a problem at one time. Well, we need to go back to this. Now food is a problem, as we know. Well, we need to go back to the point where fruit and foods of every description are just growing on every tree. And this being the case, living in such an environment where also you have good water, and it's important that it says good water. In other words, truly drinkable, fresh, uncontaminated water. When you have these things, well, now you can truly practice yoga in such a sacred grove, in a place in nature where your needs are now taken care of by God Himself, by nature herself. Now let's go on. In that pleasing, pure place, again, we're going to pause there for a moment, that pure place. This is the very epitome, what is meant by purity, is being close to nature, living in such a way that indeed you're hungry, walk 40 feet away and you can pick food off of the trees and eat them. And they're not GMO, they're not altered artificially in any way, they don't have pesticides and poisons, etc., etc., etc. But no, rather, they are as pure and organic as any food can be. You want to drink water. Well, again, you walk maybe another 100 yards in that direction, and there should be a beautiful river, a beautiful stream, and the water is absolutely uncontaminated, and you drink it, and you're drinking the freshest, most delicious, sweet-tasting water that you can imagine, etc. This is how a yogi is meant to live. This is why earlier when I read this, the first thing I said was, isn't this beautiful? And is this not something that any good person would want, is to live in such a way? So good water in a pleasing, pure place, which resounds with the chanting of the Vedas. So what does this mean? What this is describing is indeed not just any place in nature, but a place that is established as a place in which the sadhaka, the person performing sadhana, can do their meditation, do their ritual, do their yoga, etc., in a place that is established for doing such things, where indeed their very neighbors themselves are individuals who are brahmanas, who are reciting the Vedas. And can you imagine this? You wake up at, 4 o'clock in the morning, and you do all your morning ablutions, and then by, let's say, 4 a.m. you begin to do your meditation. And I'm sorry, by like 5 a.m. you begin to do your meditation. And just imagine that the sounds that you hear are the birds chirping in the trees, and the wind flowing through the trees, and the water going by in the stream near you, and off in the distance, brahmanas reciting the Vedas. Oh my Lord, what a vision of paradise for anyone who's really spiritual. In fact, this is just kind of an aside that I just have to say. If all this description you find extremely unappealing, you're not spiritual. You're the opposite. Any spiritual person would find this to be exactly how they would want to live. So let's go on. Surrounded by tranquil Vedic scholars who are devoted to their duty. So again, it's not that you're living in absolute radical isolation. No, people need company, and that being the case, if you're going to have company, live in a place that is a beautiful ashram like this, a beautiful place where you're deep in nature, and you're surrounded by people reciting the Vedas. You're surrounded by wonderful Vedic scholars, tranquil Vedic scholars, who are there just quietly reading the scriptures, reading the Vedas, when they have time teaching the Vedas to their students, etc., etc., and who are devoted, again, here we go again, devoted to their duty. If you're a Vedic scholar, you must be devoted to your duty. I'm so tempted to go very deeply into what this means in this specific context. Maybe I'll just say a few words, but I won't go as deeply as I would like to if we had the time. If an individual, indeed, again, claims to be a Vedic scholar, what does that mean in today's context? That means any individual who claims that I am teaching you in one way or another, via one venue or medium or another, I am teaching you Vedic things. I'm going to state it in that way. Anything Vedic, whether spirituality, astrology, anything whatsoever that you can think of. If an individual is that sort of person, again, you see a YouTube channel, oh, here's some guru so-and-so, new age person, oh, but I'm going to comment on the Bhagavad Gita, which I know nothing about, etc., etc. This must be an individual who is devoted to their duty. And what does that mean? To be devoted to your duty as a Vedic scholar. It means that you live, you breathe, you, if you could, would eat and drink Vedic knowledge. Not, oh yes, I read 3 Deepak Chopra books and I watched a few videos by Teal Swan or someone like this, and oh, now I'm an authority on the Vedas. No, you are devoted to your duty. This means that you study yourself under an authentic guru for decades, not a year, and then let me start my YouTube channel. You study under an authentic guru for decades. It means that in everything you do, you are following what the Vedas say. This means that, again, you are following the yamas and niyamas. You're following the 4 regulative principles. It means you're a vegetarian. It means you do not drink alcohol. Alcohol does not exist for you. It means you don't smoke cigarettes. It means you do not take drugs. You don't pretend you're spiritual by taking ayahuasca or smoking marijuana, etc., etc. It means that you follow what the scriptures actually say. So thus, you are devoted to your duty in everything, in your actual practice of the study and under the proper tutelage, but also in your person. You personify what the Vedic scriptures are teaching you. This is what it means to be devoted to your duty. Only such a person can claim to be truly a Vedic scholar. So with that, let's go on, see what else Yajnavalkya says here. Who, having realized Brahman. So in other words, at this stage, especially, we're talking about an individual who indeed has had what technically is called Brahma Vidya. That is, they have God consciousness. Now, it doesn't mean that they necessarily are 100% enlightened at this point. No, they have experienced God consciousness. Because again, throughout all of this, we're still speaking about the sadhaka. We're still speaking about the individual who is the yogi, who is practicing yoga in order to attain the ultimate aim. So thus what is meant here by who have realized Brahman is just that. The truth is that we begin to have little hints, little experiences of God, even before enlightenment. Indeed, I've said this to people before, that if you do meditation correctly, the proper way, the authentic way, the way I teach it, the way my students perform meditation, even very early on, you can do meditation for a few months, and you will begin to have little inklings of experiences of God's presence within you. Doesn't mean you're enlightened. Indeed, if a person, as I was saying before, has some nice experience where they experience God, and then they get up, run away, and start to act like a guru, thinking they're enlightened, that would be a big mistake. But no, you can begin, even pre-enlightenment, to have experiences, to realize God. So this is what's being said here. Now let's go on. Having built a beautiful, well-protected Matha. Now let's discuss this word. Matha, very simply, is, we could say, it has a very specific meaning, but it's also synonymous with ashrama. It simply means a spiritual place of residence, a place where a person will go to live there and be a yogi. Be a yogi either by themselves or more likely in the company of other yogis, and there will be a guru present, maybe many Vedic scholars, etc. Exactly what was described. Matha simply means something a little bit higher than just an ashram. it's more of an ashram institution where there is specifically not just a guru, but an acharya who is there. So it's an institutional ashram where it is also representing a very ancient lineage, etc. That's what a mata is, even more so than an ashrama. So now, with that understanding, let's look at this again. Having built a beautiful, well-protected mata. So on the one hand, it must be beautiful. On the other hand, it must be well protected. Again, interesting how, without the tutelage of the guru, we can just go through things like this very quickly and not notice these things. Very interesting. So again, an individual who is a yogi should establish and live in such a place, an ashram, mata. But how is it described? On the one hand, beautiful. So with everything that's been described, it should indeed be something that is inspiring, where again, you're surrounded by nature and the building is beautiful, the furniture is beautiful. You are in a place in the forest where it is the most beautiful place, etc., etc. For that matter, the people who are inhabiting there are beautiful people because they're glowing with the knowledge, with the experience of Brahman, of God. So it is beautiful on the one hand. On the other hand, what else does this say? Well protected. So in other words, again, what is meant by well protected? You have to have defenses against evil people, against demonic beings, etc. Against individuals who would want to come there and rob the ashram, rob the mata, or take advantage of the people, harm them in some way, etc. So on the one hand, a true spiritual institution is a place that is beautiful. On the other hand, they're armed. How else to say it? If you visited an ashram 50,000 years ago, you would have seen the most beautiful place on earth, in which, had evil people come, all the yogis there, their swords would be drawn. It's not one or the other. It's not one or the other. Only for a small mind is it one or the other. No, you can be a yogi warrior. You can be an individual who, again, you steep yourself in the beauty of nature and you want tranquility and equipoise and peace. And what you're seeking is to realize your true self, to realize God, etc. And at the same time, like the Shaolin monks, the Buddhist Chan, a lot of people don't know this. The Shaolin monks of China were Zen Buddhists, what we would call Zen. It's actually Chan in Chinese. Like these people, you are working on self-realization, and at the same time, an evil dacoit, to quote Prabhupada, some evil thief or someone, a band of raiders tries to attack your ashram, it will be the biggest mistake of their lives because you're trained in martial arts. You will defend the ashram. So both, not one or the other, both. Beauty and defense, self-protection. So let's go on. Near a temple or a flowing river, ideally both. Actually, let me just say this, ideally both. But indeed, this mata, this place that you establish to do your spiritual exercises, should be near either a sacred temple, a temple that's been established for some time, or should be near a flowing river. Indeed, this latter part especially, that it should be near a temple, that's kind of a given. We can understand that. Well, this is an ashram. You should be near a temple so that you can visit the temple, offer your obeisances, have darshana of the murtis, etc. But also it should be near a flowing river. The reason why this is the case is because flowing rivers in general are considered to be of the nature of auspiciousness, and that for energetic reasons, which again I can but won't go very deeply into just due to time. But also so you can have access to the river. Again, you can drink from the river, you can bathe yourself, clean everything you need, etc. Let's go on. In a village or a city. Very nice. So it can indeed be in a village or a city, but keep in mind what is meant by a city in this context. You see, when I was talking about cities just a short time ago, I was talking about New York. I was talking about Detroit. I was talking about London. I was talking about Paris. I was talking about hellholes. And I'm from New York City. I was talking about hellholes. In this context, we're talking about Vedic cities, where The largest that a Vedic city would be a city with a population of 50,000 people, many of them smaller. You could have a population of 10,000 people, and that would be considered a city. Now, this being the case, when you're talking about small areas, so it says a village or a city, yes, you can have ashrams in such places. Again, they are not ideal. Even in Vedic times, again, you just have to read the scriptures. Can you, in theory, have, let's say, an ashram in a, for example, sacred city, like let's say Ayodhya or Vrindavana? Of course you can. Of course you can, but there's a difference. It's a sacred city. There was something that occurred in that city to make it sacred. But when it comes to cities in general, even tiny cities versus the countryside, the closer you are to nature, the better. So let's go on now. Abounding in water. Yes, you must be surrounded by water in every sense. Again, flowing rivers, ponds, just every sort of water. That's bathing places, bathing houses, etc., etc. Let's go on. Filled with fruits and roots. We already discussed that, so we'll go on. With flowers of different varieties. Again, that's self-explanatory. That's part of beauty. Also, flowers can be used for medicinal reasons, etc., to make beautiful healing teas, etc. Let's go on. The entire surroundings being capable of bestowing all desired results. In other words, culturally, civilizationally, environmentally, perfection. Perfection. The yogi is to live in such a place that in his environment he is self-sustained, he is surrounded by beauty, and he has every single thing that he needs, both materially and to grow spiritually. So in other words, this one little clause here is summing up everything that was just said, that we've looked at this evening. So he should live in a perfect place that is capable of bestowing all desired results. Now let's go on. All right, and in that Matha. All right, very good. So this is how he should live. Now begins the last really section of these verses. The aspirant should bathe thrice a day. Now let's stop there. Let me speak about this for a moment, because this is one that I am sure probably trips people up a little bit. Well, wait a minute. I'm living in Boston and I'm trying to be a yogi to the best that I can. Yes, I'm not living in the countryside right now, but it's my eventual goal. I'm really trying my best, but this means I have to take a shower 3 times a day? No, not a shower. that would be illogical, and the Vedas are the opposite of illogical. What is meant by this is a sacred bath, a ritual bath as part of one's sadhana, but that is also practical in that it cleans you. You see, this is why I referred to this earlier as ablutions. This is a word that nobody uses anymore. It's an English word. Feel free to look it up. And what this means is one's bathing ritual. So when an individual is a yogi, when an individual is, again, living in such circumstances, and they are near a river, which is often a sacred river, part of one's sadhana throughout the day is 3 times a day, in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the early evening, not too late. You do ritual bath. That is, you go into the river, or if you don't have a river, a pond, you go there up to your chest, you have your Brahmana thread, you say your Gayatri mantra, and you take part of the river, you say mantra, and you offer it back into the river, into the pond, etc. And this is part of Vedic ritual. So no, it's not the idea that, oh, you're living in your apartment again, somewhere, outside of in Miami, or even in some nice, somewhat more rural area, and I have to take 3 showers today. First of all, for a lot of people that would not hurt. Number 1. Number 2, again, that's not quite what this is referring to. It's referring to sacred bath, ritual bath. Now let's go on. And such a person must always be devoted. Again, it repeats this, to his duty according to varna-ashrama-dharma. Now, it's repeating this. I've said this many times. There is 0 redundancy in the Vedic scriptures. 0. The Vedic scriptures were not written by chimpanzees. These people wrote in Sanskrit, the most advanced language on the face of the earth. And I know I've studied not only Sanskrit, but Latin. Latin is the grunting of, of ignoramuses in comparison with Sanskrit. And these people spoke and taught and wrote in Sanskrit. These were smart people. There's no redundancy in the Vedic scriptures. So the fact that it's repeated means what? You can say it loudly.
It's important.
It's important. I've said this many, many times. You're now immortalized in one of our live streams. Very good. When the Vedic scriptures repeat something twice, thrice, or even more, it's telling you, pay attention. So now let's pay attention to this. Must always be devoted to what? His duty, according to varna-ashrama-dharma. Now you see why earlier when we spoke of duty, I stressed this and the importance so much. Duty is something that we as noble people, as individuals who claim to be noble, who claim to be virtuous, who claim to be spiritual, we do our duty no matter what. No excuses. Excuses is for not even children, the tiniest of children. If you're an adult, you do your duty, period. So thus the repetition. Such an individual listens to Vedanta. Well, that means that they are extremely philosophical, and indeed they learn the conclusions, the philosophical conclusions of Vedanta. Vedanta meaning the culmination of the Vedic teachings. And practice the path of yoga. And they practice yoga. An individual who is a serious spiritual practitioner, indeed they practice yoga with everything that means. This means that they spend their life perfecting headstand, downward dog? No. That too if you can, sure, but that's of least importance. By yoga, of course, what is meant first and foremost is meditation with the goal of precisely what yoga means. Yoga means union with the divine, not becoming God, but becoming so closely aligned with God to the point where we and God are spiritually inseparable. In other words, God consciousness, God realization. So this is how Yajnavalkya ends this passage from his Yoga Yajnavalkya, is that indeed, having done all this, an individual is now eligible. Let me repeat this, so people understand the seriousness of what yoga and Sanatana Dharma really is. Having done everything that was just described, now a person is eligible indeed to learn Vedanta and to practice yoga, the Ashtanga system, in order to perfect oneself, in order to have the twofold goal of the yoga system, and that is self-realization, Atma-jnana, and God consciousness, Brahma-vidya. So thus ends this passage, at least, of the Yoga Yajnavalkya. And with that, again, I've been doing this a lot recently. Who knows? Maybe this will be a trend. I hope not, because I like to try to end on time. But we're going to end here, and not for very long. And I apologize that we did go long, but as you could see, it was important. It was one full thought, a stream of thought in these passages. I'm going to take some questions. So if anyone has any pertinent questions, any questions that pertain to Sanatana Dharma, yoga, etc., please feel free to ask. Very good. Let me very quickly answer this very nicely worded, very courteous question. But basically, you're asking, can we prove the existence of soul? Let me answer this the way I always answer questions like this. Can we prove X? Can we prove God exists? Can we prove something that is metaphysical? Can we prove, and of course what's meant by prove, you see, I wrote a 450-page book about this. It's called The Vedic Way of Knowing God, where I speak very deeply about the various processes of epistemology. What do you mean by prove? Do you mean either empirically, i.e., oh, I now have sensorial evidence of such, or do you mean logically in accordance with intellect that, oh, A leads to B, B leads to C, therefore necessarily D? We're talking about metaphysical topics that are beyond those tools. When you're trying to uncover the truth of something that is infinitely beyond the tools that you are employing to try to quote-unquote prove something, that's a fool's errand. So this is why I don't address such questions because, and please don't take this the wrong way. I know you asked this very sincerely and with very nice etiquette, actually. But usually in the past, I find questions like this come from fools, from people who are too steeped in modern internet culture. Where's the evidence? There's a whole culture of low IQ individuals who this is their mantra. Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence at XYZ? You know? And we don't answer such questions because, again, epistemologically, they make no sense. It makes no sense to proffer quote unquote evidence of something that is trans-empirical and trans-intellectual, and to, despite that fact, try to understand that metaphysical object or object of concern using the senses or intellect. So I don't answer such questions. Can God be proven? Can the soul be proven? Can reincarnation be proven? Etc., etc., etc. The way that we know things yogically is via experience. That's how we know things. So this is how we know. Not pratyaksha, not anumana, but via shabda, via direct experience. We understand consciousness via consciousness. That's the tool we use. Very good. So with that, let's go on. Very nice. Good. Here's a nice question from Love Conqueror, and it's a very practical one. It's about the ISDS, and it is, Namaste Acharyaji, I offer my heartfelt obeisances unto you. Would you please speak on ISDS endeavors to establish this yogi culture? How can we help build a Matha in the Vedic heartland? Thank you. Very nice. Very good. Well, two questions. And let me say, as far as your first question, when an individual becomes very, very deeply involved in the ISDS, let me put it this way, to the degree in which an individual becomes involved, to that degree more and more is revealed to them practically as far as what the ISDS is doing, to the point where 100%, well, no, not 100%, 90% of what the ISDS is doing is known by probably about 5 people. 100% is known only by me. But indeed, we're engaged in many, many projects, including, and I'll just tell you a few that we've spoken about publicly, many we can't. Publicly, we are establishing varna-ashrama again. We have established already the 4 orders. We have a Brahminical order. We have a Dharma Vajra, that is the thunderbolt of Dharma, which is our Kshatriya order. We have established a mercantile association for Vaishyas. We have not done this latter part yet, only because the numbers are not there. But in time, we want to have labor guilds for individuals who consider themselves Shudras. So again, that last part has not been established. In addition to this, all of the Vedic arts and sciences are either already in the process of or in the future will be brought to their perfection and revealed perfectly to the world. And what does this mean? Well, we have individuals, disciples of mine, for example, who are studying Vedic astrology. We are going to reestablish Vedic astrology in its pure form. In the future, we're going to have individuals who are going to study Vedic martial arts and who will teach this and form institutions, etc. And I can go on and on, but again, you know, the more involved, seriously involved a person is with the ISDS, the more they just very naturally learn about all of these projects. The second part of your question, how can we build a Matha in the Vedic heartland? Very easily. Number one, we already have a temple here. And where we are situated is in a place that was necessary. And that is, we are in technically the city, but on the very outskirts. Literally 10 minutes away, there are cornfields and there are farms. So we are as far from the downtown area as is possible while still being within city limits. But in the future, our goal is indeed to have a Matha in the true sense of that term. And when I say in the future, I've already spoken about this with several people, probably in about 2 years. We want to have land. We want to have acreage. We want to have a separate temple building. We want to have an actual institution where many, many classes will be taking place, as well as a residential area where individuals who are either full-time brahmacharis or who are serious students, not just the public, but serious students who want to stay for a week, a month, and study, they will have facility to do that. So again, probably in about 2 years, we'll have the full funding to do that. We're close to there already. Again, I'm not going to go into detail, but it's not as difficult as it seems. We will have something like this in about 2 years or so here in the Vedic heartland. So I hope that answers your question. Very nice. Very good. Here is a very good question from Varsaga, and it's actually a very good question. And it is, Namaste Acharyaji, what makes God realize beings infinitely free? And then you say, I've seen people criticize our tradition by claiming eternal service to God and Guru seems like slavery. Very nice. This is this is a claim that has existed since almost, not quite, but let's say, as far as there have been humans. Let me put it that way, actually, as far as there have been Manusya, and Manusya very much in illusion. Yes, let me say a few things about this, actually. First of all, individuals who think that surrendering to God equates to slavery are individuals who are living in fear, not understanding that in actuality, every human being is a servant of, is a slave of other beings and things and occurrences outside of themselves anyway. We are a slave to our own body. You know, your body becomes ill, you are a slave to your body, you have to follow the dictates of your body. You are a slave of your own mind, you begin to get Alzheimer's. Well, now suddenly you are imprisoned within your very own mind, etc., etc. You have a job? Need I say more? You're a child, you have parents, you have to go to school. Need I say more? Etc., etc., etc. Now, this is what is interesting, is that, again, with this understanding, which no one can deny, a person might try, but it would be a very humorous attempt on their part. No, we're all servants of something or someone. We're all slaves of something or someone. With this understanding, it is the case that with individuals who are surrendering to God, several things. First of all, we are surrendering to a being who does not need us to surrender. That's the first thing to understand. You see, when we are serving people within the material world, oh, they need us. That's why we're serving them. That's why they're paying us money, for example. They wouldn't pay us money if they didn't need us. God doesn't need us to serve him. It is not in God's interest that we serve him. There are an infinite number of beings already in Vaikuntha, in the spiritual realm, who are there in bliss, in happiness, in complete freedom, who are serving God. God doesn't need a number that will add 1 or 10 or 1,000 to an infinite number. Even mathematically, you can understand how that's the case, and to say the contrary is ludicrous. No, rather, when we uncover our true selves, what we are doing is indeed freeing ourselves from that slavery that is there. When we begin to make spiritual progress, what we are doing is, indeed, we are first and foremost, we are freeing ourselves from others. Let me start with that. I can go into this very in depth, actually, and maybe I will. We are first and foremost freeing ourselves from others. What does that mean? The person who is a yogi, the person who is truly a spiritual person, is someone who does not care what others say about him. He is someone who is in rebellion, personal rebellion from society. He is an individual he is the ultimate outsider in the true sense of that term. He is an individual who he goes against the current of those around him, of indeed even the very culture itself. Everyone else is veering toward materialism. Indeed, everyone else wishes to be slaves to their jobs, to the culture, to the propaganda, news media, etc., whereas that one individual says, no, I don't care what the media tells me. I don't care what Disney tells me. I don't care what school tells me, etc., etc. I wish to do the right thing. I want to know myself perfectly. I want to know that which is the self of myself. So right there alone, this is the first way in which this individual is practicing freedom and radical independence, is that they're freeing themselves from, again, anyone who would enslave them, including institutions. The other way in which they are freeing themselves from this, maybe I'll leave it at that, because truthfully, like I said, I'm realizing now I can go extremely deeply into this, and I don't want to go that deeply. Let me just say, such an individual is seeking to know themselves perfectly. That being the case, how can an individual even claim to be free if they don't know themselves? I'm a person who's 100% free, but I don't even know who I am. I'm identifying with things that are not intrinsic to who I am. So in this way also, the individual who is on the spiritual path is an individual who is seeking true freedom by knowing and possessing their true self. And when it comes to, I'm dealing with your questions in opposite order, but now you've asked, let's see, what makes a God realize being infinitely free? Yeah, it's precisely this. It's the fact that it is in knowing themselves that they now have the wisdom tools necessary to exercise their freedom fully. So in surrendering to God, it's not that we're doing God a favor, rather God is doing us a favor. And that God is allowing us to be freed from that very illusion that has enslaved us to begin with. So again, I'm trying to rush through this a little bit. I wish I had like another half hour to answer your question in exacting detail, but that's the answer. Very good. And with that, I might just take one more question that is maybe a little bit, that I can answer a little bit more quickly. Let me answer this very, very, very practical question. And again, it's another question that has to do with the ISDS, actually. And this is from Jason. And let me answer this because I don't believe I've ever answered this publicly before. I've discussed this with all the leaders of the ISDS. I've discussed this with many of my serious students, etc. But I've never addressed this. And it is, Namaste Acharyaji, will the ISDS open branch locations, or will it primarily be based out of Omaha, Nebraska? I live in New Hampshire currently. Let me actually answer that. The answer is yes and no, and let me explain why. I'm someone who I have studied movements for the last almost 50 years, actually. And I've also studied movements within the context of history. And we're living in a time right now, specifically, where very practically speaking, to open up physical branches of institutions, is extremely difficult because people don't come. Everyone is online. Everyone is on their cell phone. Everyone does things remotely now. So practically speaking, it's very difficult to establish physical locations in places. Plus, it's a lot less necessary. Indeed, we could, let's say, have $1 million and establish a temple in Boston. We can advertise it, etc. But today, unlike in the 70s, see, in the 70s, 50 people would come. Today, 2 people will come. And that's simply because the culture has changed. Everyone does things online. People don't really get together physically anymore, other than for parties. Parties, concerts, things like that. When it comes to things of importance, it's kind of a rare thing. At the same time, with this understanding that, as I've said in the past, people's minds are not in the streets anymore. People don't do things in the streets. People don't go to locations as much. Everyone's mind is online, whether the internet, on their phone, etc., etc. That being the case, this is why most of what we have done has indeed been going to where people are, and that is online. And we have been radically successful in doing this. At the same time, when it comes to opening physical branches, in time, it's my personal hope that society will maybe shift again to the point where people are physically getting together again, and to the point where we can indeed start to open branches throughout the world. Again, we have students in dozens and dozens and dozens of nations throughout the world. And in the future, it is my hope that when in a given location, let's say a city, London, Berlin, any place. When it gets to the point where there are enough of our students there to warrant having a physical branch where they're actually going to physically get together, etc., we will do that. We will absolutely do that. So it's kind of a mixed answer. On the one hand, what we're doing is working extremely well, and for reasons that are outside of our hands, nothing we can do. On the other hand, I personally would like to have branches of the ISDS in every single city on the face of the earth. And again, not downtown, kind of at the outskirts of the city, as much as possible. So you say that you are currently in New Hampshire. Hopefully, in time, there will be enough devotees where you are that we can indeed have a branch there. But again, it has to be more than 1 or 2 or 3 people. It has to be a good number, and then there will be a branch there. And not only will there be a branch there, but I guarantee, Jason, once there is a branch there, I'll come there myself and visit and give a talk there. So, hope that answers the question. With that, we're going to stop here because we are over time. And again, I thank you all very, very much for being here with us for this Satsangha event. And please join us again next Monday. And the ISDS is a movement that I hope you will begin to explore, and explore very deeply if you're new. If you are someone who is not new, I hope that you will begin to explore our teachings deeper and deeper and deeper. And more than anything, I'm going to end by saying this. Everything that we just looked at today, all these teachings of Yoga Yajnavalkya, I hope that you will take these teachings seriously. And again, this not being purely Vedic times right now, not all of these necessarily can be adhered to right now, but as much as you can. Whichever of these ideas you can incorporate into your life spiritually, I hope that you will please do so in a very practical way. And with that, namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Suryavansha Jayate. Om Hari Om. And with that, everyone, between now and the next time that we get together, I ask you all, please, in every way, that you take very good care of yourselves.